There is a quiet storm that walks in human form. It is a woman who was not taught how to be strong. She learned it. She did not inherit it like a family heirloom, she excavated it from the bedrock of her own brokenness. She did not have a map, a guide, a gentle hand pulling her up. She had the falling, and then the long, dark silence of the chasm, and then her own two hands finding purchase in the dark. This is a different kind of strength. It is not the performance of fearlessness. It is not the armor of bitterness. It is a deep, resonant, and often lonely integration. From the perspective of Carl Jung's psychology, this woman is not merely surviving, she is undergoing a profound, archetypal process of individuation, often in extreme isolation. Her strength is the byproduct of a psyche forced to become its own parent, its own teacher, its own sanctuary. And this journey leaves marks, not scars, but sigils, unmistakable signs of a soul that has negotiated its own becoming. To recognize these signs is to understand a profound psychological truth, that the most formidable power is often born not in the light of support, but in the fertile darkness of the solitary self. The first sign is a deep, unshakable comfort with solitude. For this woman, being alone is not a punishment or a loneliness, it is a homeland. While others may fray at the edges without constant external noise and validation, she finds in silence not emptiness, but a profound fullness. This is because her early environment likely did not provide adequate reflection or containment. Her emotional world was not mirrored back to her in a way that made her feel real and coherent. So, she retreated inward. In Jungian terms, the connection to the outer world, the persona, the mask we wear in society, was fractured or never properly formed in a healthy way. Instead of developing a fluid persona that could engage and then retreat, she often had to adopt a defensive, rigid one to survive, or she abandoned the effort almost entirely in favor of the inner reality. Consequently, her relationship with the collective unconscious, that vast inner sea of archetypes and instincts, became primary. Solitude is where she communes with that inner world. It is where she hears the voice of the self, the central archetype of wholeness, more clearly than the voices of the crowd. Her strength is rooted in this inner dialogue, forged in the quiet where she learned to be her own witness, her own validator, her own company. She doesn't just tolerate being alone, she knows it as the soil from which her entire being has grown. The second sign is a discerning, almost psychic, clarity about people and motives. She can walk into a room and sense the emotional temperature, the hidden tensions, the unspoken agendas with an accuracy that can seem unnerving. This is not a parlor trick, it is a hard-won survival mechanism. When you are not protected, you become a cartographer of danger. You learn to read the micro-expressions, the tones, the gaps in stories. Jung would say this is a function of a highly developed intuitive function, often born from necessity. But it goes deeper. In her journey, she has been forced to confront her own shadow, the repository of all the rejected, dark, and uncomfortable parts of herself. Because she has had to face her own darkness alone, her rage, her envy, her primal instincts for survival, she can recognize the shadows of others. She is not easily fooled by the persona, the social mask, because she has intimately known the cost of wearing one that doesn't fit. She sees the shadow peeking through the cracks. This discernment is a form of protection, yes, but it is also a form of profound insight. It is the wisdom of one who has navigated the underworld of the human psyche and can now recognize its landmarks in others. The third sign is a relationship with help that is complex and fiercely independent. She finds it extraordinarily difficult to ask for assistance, to rely on others, to show vulnerability in need. This is frequently misinterpreted as pride or stubbornness. In her psychological reality, it is a deep-seated knowledge, carved into her nervous system, that help was not coming. That to depend was to be disappointed, to be left more vulnerable, to be betrayed. Her archetypal experience may have been that of the abandoned child or the orphan. So, she internalized the protector. She became, for herself, the reliable parent that was absent. This is a profound act of psychic integration, she internalized the archetype of the caregiver. But this comes at a cost. The animus, the inner masculine principle in a woman's psyche, often develops in a specific way. Instead of being a bridge to the outer world of action and logic in a balanced way, it can become a fortress guard, a stern inner figure that says, "We will do it ourselves. We will not be beholden. We will not risk that hurt again." This creates immense resilience, but it can also wall off the softer, receptive, connecting energies of the feminine principle, making true intimacy a later, harder lesson to learn. The fourth sign is the presence of a creative force or a deep, immersive inner world that serves as a primary refuge. This could be writing, art, music, dance, gardening, coding, building, any channel through which the contents of the unconscious can flow into form. For this woman, this was not a hobby, it was a lifeline. When the outer world was hostile, confusing, or absent, the inner world became a sanctuary. Active imagination, the Jungian technique of engaging consciously with inner figures and energies, was something she often stumbled upon naturally. Her creativity was the vessel through which her unconscious could speak, could heal, could reorganize itself. It was how she processed pain that had no witness. It was how she gave form to the formless turmoil inside. This creative output is the proof of her ongoing dialogue with the self. It is the tangible evidence of her individuation process. The characters she writes, the images she paints, the solutions she engineers, they are all aspects of her own psyche being made conscious, integrated, and offered to the world. Her strength is not just in endurance, but in this relentless, generative ability to transform suffering into meaning, chaos into order, isolation into a universe. The fifth sign is a peculiar blend of intense empathy and formidable boundaries. She can feel the emotional states of others with a piercing acuity, often because her own childhood required her to be hyper-attuned to the moods of caregivers for her own safety. This is the foundation of a deep, non-judgmental empathy. She knows what it is to hurt in silence. Yet, surrounding this soft core is a boundary of steel. She is not a sponge, she is a well. She can witness your pain, but she will not drown in it with you. She has learned, through devastating experience, where she ends and another begins. This is a critical achievement in Jungian psychology, the differentiation of the ego from the unconscious and from the psyches of others. For someone who likely started with porous boundaries, this development is a monumental task. It represents the conscious structuring of her own psyche. She knows the cost of enmeshment, of carrying what is not hers. So, her empathy is not weakness, it is a conscious choice. Her boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but fortifications to protect the sacred, soft center she has worked so hard to preserve and understand. She can say no with a clarity that shocks people, because that no is the voice of the self defending its hard-won integrity. The sixth sign is a comfort with darkness, both in herself and in life. She does not subscribe to naive optimism. She has a lived understanding of suffering, of loss, of the cycles of death and rebirth. She can sit with someone in their despair without needing to frantically fix it or plaster over it with platitudes. This is because she has had to sit with her own. She has made the Nikia, the night sea journey, into her own underworld. She has conversed with her shadow. She has met her inner demons and discovered that many were just wounded parts of herself in monstrous disguise. This familiarity with the dark gives her a tremendous psychological advantage. She is not terrified of the shadowy aspects of life, failure, grief, anger, endings. She knows they are part of the totality. She understands, at a bone-deep level, the archetype of the wounded healer. She knows her own wounds, and from that place of knowing, she can sometimes extend a healing presence to others. But it is a healing that does not come from a place of pristine, untouched wholeness, but from the scar tissue that has proven stronger than the original skin. The seventh sign is a leadership style that is often quiet, catalytic, and based on competence rather than title. She doesn't need to be the loudest in the room. She often leads by example, by sheer capability, by seeing the solution others miss. Having had to be her own authority, she develops an internal locus of control that is unshakable. She looks within for direction, not to external hierarchies or opinions. This reflects a highly developed connection to the self as the inner ruler, the inner guide. Her animus, instead of being projected onto external men as saviors or adversaries, has been internalized as an inner capacity for focused action, logic, and purposeful direction. She doesn't lead to gain power over others, she leads because she has learned to wield the power within herself effectively. She can build, organize, and execute because she has had to build a functioning psyche from the ground up. This makes her incredibly resourceful and often underestimated. Her strength is not in commanding attention, but in the silent, relentless gravity of her competence. The eighth sign is a peculiar relationship with the past. She is not defined by it, but she is deeply informed by it. She likely does not spend hours in nostalgia or bitter rumination. Instead, her past is a mind territory. She has gone back, alone, to excavate the lessons. She has engaged in her own form of psychotherapy without a therapist, through reflection, through journaling, through her art, through her dreams. She has worked to withdraw the projections she placed on others, to understand the archetypal patterns at play in her early life, the terrible mother, the absent father, the orphan child. She has striven to make the unconscious dynamics conscious. Because of this, she carries her history not as an open, weeping wound, but as a source of data, of wisdom. She can speak of it with a clarity that lacks self-pity, because she has done the labor of integration. The trauma is not erased, but it has been metabolized into strength. It has become part of her story, not the whole of her identity. This is the very essence of the individuation process, taking the raw, often painful material of one's personal history and the collective unconscious, and transforming it into a coherent, unique expression of the self. The ninth and perhaps most profound sign is an aura of unshakable, quiet authenticity. She is not easily swayed by trends, by collective opinions, by the need to belong. The persona she presents to the world is remarkably aligned with who she feels herself to be inside. There is little gap, little performance. This is the crowning achievement of her solitary journey, the reconciliation of the persona with the self. Having been forced to discard or never fully trust the mask society offered, she had to discover who was underneath. Her persona is not a rigid mask of the strong woman, but a flexible, conscious expression of her true nature. She can be vulnerable when she chooses, because she knows her own strength can hold it. She can be soft, because her boundaries are secure. She can be unconventional, because her authority comes from within. This authenticity is magnetic and sometimes intimidating. It is the power of someone who is not trying to be anything other than what she is, a whole, self-authored human being. She embodies the Jungian ideal of individuation, becoming who you inherently are. This woman's strength, therefore, is a psychological masterpiece built in solitude. It is a tapestry woven from threads of shadow and light, suffering and insight, isolation and profound self-discovery. Her signs are not badges of a life unlived, but runes of a profound inner conquest. She is the modern embodiment of ancient archetypes, the orphan who survives, the wanderer who searches, the warrior who protects, and the sage who learns. Her journey underscores a central Jungian truth, that the path to wholeness often leads first into the deepest parts of oneself, away from the collective, into the dark where the true self awaits. Her strength, learned completely on her own, is not a rejection of the world, but a testament to the irreducible, indomitable world within. She is a living reminder that the most important teacher, the most reliable protector, and the most potent source of strength we will ever encounter, resides in the silent, sovereign depths of our own psyche.